Hey, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Howie Jacobson. My day job is as a coach, helping people live better lives. I coach executives and leaders, I coach entrepreneurs, and I coach civilians who are looking to improve their lives, their health, their relationships. Basically, it allows me to do what I didn't think was possible, which is to help people completely erase bad habits and different ways of being, erase negative feelings and replace them with positive ones, rather than just help people develop new strategies to compete with the old ones or new thought patterns to debate the old thought patterns. And I'm looking for people to work with. And I have reduced my rates a lot so that I can just get as much practice in as I can. So I am going to raise them back up to my normal fees, but right now I just need a lot of practice and feedback, and I have teachers and mentors. So if you're interested in getting my best coaching, better than I've ever done, at a big discount, email me, hj@plantyourself.com. So let's get on with the show. So I'm an entrepreneur and a small business owner. I work for myself. I make my living writing, teaching, coaching, training, consulting, and I also have this podcast. And I've had this podcast for over 10 years, and it's not really part of my business. It never kind of was. And I've seen other people's plant-based podcasts, blow up and get sponsorships and catapult them to book deals and all sorts of wonderful things. And I've always felt like I've got to be really pure, and I can't have any sponsorships. I can't sell ads. I can't get affiliate commissions from people that I have on the show. And on the one hand, it feels great to just be able to do whatever I want, to have whatever guest I want, to not have to worry about offending anyone or having to tout some particular supplement that then turns out not to be that useful or even dangerous. But at the same time, it certainly has limited my impact in at least in terms of scale. And I have had my whole life a very tenuous and conflictual relationship with business, with the idea of making money, with the idea of getting big. And so I'm delighted to talk today to Mark Silver, who has written a book called Heart-Centered Business. And he is the founder of heartofbusiness.com, which is also a small business that helps people like me who want to make a difference, who want to be good in the world, but also get our needs met, and to do so in a way without having to compromise our values through, sleazy marketing and sales tactics, through spending, hours and hours and hours doing things we hate doing just because the business needs them, or giving up altogether and just getting a job and not sharing our gifts with the world at all. So that's what this conversation is really about. We start out by talking about the big myths that make business icky for people, and what we can do and what we can think about and how to go about building a small business that really serves the world while it's serving, nourishing, and sustaining us as well. Hope you enjoy. So without further ado, Mark Silver, welcome back to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, I'm delighted to have you back, because you've just written a book, which feels it's like a very daunting book to write because it's comprehensive. It's not like I'm writing this book and there's one thing that is meaningful to me right now, or I think can help people. You really kind of wrote a book about your entire system and philosophy. And I've known of you and known your work and been following you for a long time, but there was plenty in here that just hit me at a whole other level. So I just want to thank you for, you've done all the blogs, you've done all the videos, but there's something about putting it in a book that I think is a very generous thing to put out into the world. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting distillation process. I've never had ambitions to be a published author, and when this opportunity came up, it was the right thing to do. I just felt it in my heart and kind of pursued it. But the level of editing and work that goes into making a book it's just a whole different level. And I'm I now know, like so many authors do, what kind of a team effort it is. And I'm just deeply grateful to my wife, Holly, and my developmental editor, Andrea, who just, and the publisher, Wildhouse, who really helped to make the book sparkle. It's like, it's way beyond the effort I put into a blog post usually. And and I'm grateful. I'm grateful that it landed so beautifully with you.
Yeah. So if I remember later, I'm going to ask you like what you learned, what you didn't know until you wrote the book. But why don't we start with, where my listeners are at, like, who the hell are you and what do you do? Right? So maybe start by saying that the title of the book and a little bit of your business, and just kind of reintroduce yourself to folks.
Sure. Well, the book is Heart-Centered Business, Healing from Toxic Business Culture, so your small business can thrive. For the last 23 plus years, I've been working with thousands of business owners to people that really want to make a difference in the world. And their business has to work. In order to do that, they need to make a profit. And the work that we do helps people realize that every act of business can be an act of love. And we work primarily with smaller businesses, micro-sized businesses, and I really want to. There's so much I could say here, but business has been such a terrible, dysfunctional, toxic force in the world over the last few centuries, since the invention of capitalism, really, even though commerce and trade has existed as long as humans have been around, in various forms, that we need deep healing. It's not the only thing that's needed. There's so much that's needed to have the beautiful world that we know we can have. But the healing in the realm of business is definitely a big one. And I see small businesses, healthy, vibrant small businesses, being a part of the big transition that can help bring us into a healthier culture.
Yeah. Well, if it's got to start somewhere, it's going to start with the people who are closest to already agreeing with you. And those are the people who are not going into business because it's so toxic, right? And so, if we're going to start somewhere, I would argue that the kind of people who feel called in their hearts to create these micro businesses that can be enough and can be helpful, right? Like they're the ones who are going to be the vanguard of any kind of consciousness shift.
I think so, for a lot of different reasons, but they're also the ones who can, get hit the hardest because, they don't have the deep pockets of a large corporation. They don't, it's easy to feel alone. It's easy to feel like the combination of the work that you think you need to do to make the business successful, as well as the personal development and growth and spiritual journey of trying to put a healthy business into the world and earn your living from it. It can be quite a lot. And to do that solo, I don't want anyone to have to go through that solo. I don't want to have anyone to have to feel like they're all alone on the journey. Even a relatively small business, but one that's already a corporation, has a team, there's people around, and there's others to share the journey. But so many people in micro-sized businesses, maybe there's a few people around, but a lot of people start out solo, and I don't want them to feel like they have to do that by themselves, because it's too big a burden for anyone to do anything in this world on our own.
Yeah. Well, so one of my favorite things is when I go to Facebook and I see you've written another blog post explaining why this or that prevailing ethos in internet marketing or get rich quick or entrepreneurship is harmful and utter bullshit, and people should stop doing it and should run away from people who do it. And it's just this beautiful, clear calling out. So maybe we start there, because from my story is I was a school teacher for many years and just, I didn't want to touch business. I didn't know anyone who was in business. I didn't know how anyone made more than $29,000 a year. And then somehow I stumbled upon internet marketing in 2002 and, right time, right place. And, was basically learning, oh, this is direct marketing for a new medium. And here's everything we know about direct marketing from,
Right.
Claude Hopkins and all this stuff. And it was tremendously effective. And yet I found myself so many times feeling like, well, I could be like, I'm smarter than these guys. I could be more successful than my peers if I would only be willing to do the things they were doing. And I couldn't articulate why I didn't want to do them, or if I did them, why I did them half-assed. The little manipulations, the little tricks, the little, one of the things I learned from my first copywriting teacher is, you have bullets in a sales letter. He says bullets are supposed to wound. Right. And I was like, oh, that's great advice. That's how you get them. And, and so I had a struggling business for about a decade. And I was good at it, and I helped people, and I charged good money. But still, it's like it was the whole thing was on this kind of emotional,
and it's so
spiritual
painful.
life support.
Most of the people that we work with, some of them kind of forged ahead, half-assed, like you say, because they just didn't know any other way to do it, and many people they can't. They've already been exposed to enough toxicity, maybe in the corporate world, maybe in another context, maybe just, in life. And they just won't follow through if it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't feel ethical, if it doesn't match their values. And so many people struggle in their businesses because of that, or, because they won't follow through. And I so support them. Like that's wisdom. I start out the very beginning of the book, that if you have issues with business, that's legitimate. Like, I don't want you to get over that. There's wisdom there, and it's going to help you discern your way through, to finding the path that is ethical, that is heart-centered, rather than getting sucked into these kinds of, oh my God, bullets are supposed to wound. I mean, how dead do you have to be inside to want to do that to people just to get money from them? That's
Well, but it was almost never put to me like that, right? There was always this veneer of like, if you saw somebody in a burning building, and what would you do to get them out if they weren't aware?
The truth
or
is
someone
that
just dropped
and
$100
I
bill
was a
on the street
volunteer
and you picked it
firefighter.
up and you wanted to run after
When
it
you're
to give it to
rescuing
them because,
people,
right?
they
But
want to
the
get out. There's
presumption
not
is
like
that
a
we
lot
know
of confusion
what they need
about
better
what's
than they
wanted in those situations. Yes, they want to get out of the building. Yes, they want to be saved. There's not, it's like to create these kinds of metaphors that are so inherently false. And because I used to be a first responder, I was a career paramedic years ago. It's like one of the things that I ask people to do when they're faced with these kinds of selling tactics is, if you slow everything down, it's often easier to see your way through some of the manipulative sales techniques if you're being subject to them, because they so depend on people being in a reaction, being agitated, being reactive, being uncomfortable or in emotional pain.
And here we are on Zoom after Riverside didn't hold up for us. So one of the things that struck me there were so many little mindset shifts that occurred for me, and I really, for a lot of them, it was sort of like lagging indicators, like, oh, I believe this, but I didn't know I believed it, or I didn't know how to articulate it. So one of the big ones was just that there are stages to business, the same way that there are stages to a human being, and you wouldn't ask an infant to drive a car, right? And just, like giving people a sense of what's realistic, especially in a get quick rich sort of world that leaves so many people feeling like, boy, it's been a year or two and I'm not where I thought I should be. Talk
Right.
about like how you came to that realization.
Well, it's so interesting because, um, I've been doing this nearly a quarter of a century, right? And I've worked with so many people. And, after some years of doing this, I began to kind of see like, gosh, somebody needs, oh, they're struggling with it. They need to know this and they need to know this. They need to know this. And so I started kind of really getting my arms around all the different skills and different things that not only need to be learned, but put in place. And, and then I saw how people were, um, really shaming themselves, really, feeling terrible about themselves when they just didn't have the knowledge. They just didn't have the experience. And so people would say, I'd say, okay, how long did you spend learning your modality, whether it was coaching or consulting or some kind of healing modality or acupuncture? People had spent months or years learning it. And then once you learn it and you start working with people, working with clients, it takes so much longer to actually become competent and then masterful with it. It takes time, but they weren't giving themselves the same time with their business. And when I started to kind of really put all the pieces in place, like what are the pieces that really are needed? I was trying to be really responsible as a business educator and consultant and coach and healer to say, okay, so what are all the practical pieces that people need to know for the business to actually work? And when I laid them all out, I started to kind of arrange them in an order that made the easiest sense. And I began to then see the stages, like the stages started to kind of emerge for me going, oh, there's this stage. I detail it all in the book that you saw, that, like you said. And I was at first afraid to tell people, a little bit nervous, not afraid, but like I'm like, are people going to be overwhelmed? Are they going to be turned off? And the overwhelming response from folks was the same one. And now I kind of depend on it, is just relief. Like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with my business. When you put it that way, it makes sense. It just takes time, and I began to observe that for people who actually then followed the developmental stages. It's not exactly linear. You don't have to do it in the exact order that I lay it out, but it's helpful to most people if you follow the general order. And to go from like absolute creation, startup, all the way into the third stage. There's a fourth stage that's optional, but the third stage, I was watching people. The fastest I saw people go through was like around 18 months, but usually 3, 4, 5 years with successes and making money along the way. But to get to a place where the business was really stable and dependable and felt fun, 3, 4, 5 years. And people just felt they felt like they could take a breath. They felt like, oh, I don't have to do this at a sprint. Oh, there's nothing wrong with me. Oh, I can take my time with something to really learn it and be in integrity with it rather than slapdash all of these pieces in place as fast as I can and feel off balance and out of integrity in the process.
Right. I mean, we certainly hear both, slapdash, like just get it good, up is better than done. And there's truth to that.
There is.
But we also hear like, how bad do you want it? 99% of people aren't willing to do what it takes. And so the entrepreneur hears that, said, well, I guess I have to spend 100-hour weeks. I have to sacrifice family, health, friends.
Yeah, that's
love.
such a particular lie. 99% of people aren't willing to do it. I think that's really healthy. 99% of people, whatever the percentage is, aren't willing to sacrifice their health or sacrifice their relationships that are most important to them, or sacrifice a sense of ethics and a sense of morality and a sense of care in crafting their business and helping their business develop and helping people in the world in order to chase after this impossible capitalist dream or nightmare, as it were, to just try to make the most money as fast as possible. I we live on a little bit of property here in central Pennsylvania, and we like to garden, and we also are interested in permaculture and food forestry and things like that. And we planted, fruit trees, and we planted trees that were not from seed; they were already saplings. In the third year, we finally got our first peaches off the peach trees. The other trees haven't fruited yet at all. And we got a handful of peaches, not, but I know that if the peach trees survive and they continue to do well, in a few years, we're going to have way more peaches than we can eat. and, and it takes time for the tree to put that many branches in place and have that many leaves and to have the root system, right? And so it's to not there's so many examples of places where we bring patience, whether it's a child growing or fruit tree or cooking a meal or whatever, where we just see that, and if we can bring that same compassion and patience and perseverance without harming ourselves to business development, of course you can do it. It's not 1% of entrepreneurs, way more people than that can have a successful business if they're willing to give it time and willing to give it care and willing to learn the pieces that are involved.
Yeah. So I feel like going back to an even more fundamental claim that you make, and you mentioned it, that every act of business can be an act of love, that you are, you're a spiritual teacher and healer as well in the Sufi tradition. I think you described yourself as a Sufi Jewish Muslim.
Yes, it's true.
Some combination of those words.
Yes.
So like what you're also saying is that for people who tend to have a spiritual side to them, or for whom that's important, they don't have to leave that at the door when they go to work, when they create a business. In fact, you talk about the jewel, right? That part of ourselves that believes in something greater, whether it's a divinity or a mutual spirit or a beneficent force in the universe, that business can be not only aligned with it, but a flowering expression of it.
Yes. So just briefly, for people who are confused by the Jewish Muslim thing, I was raised Jewish. My family's Jewish, Eastern European. And about 20 some years ago, I took Shahada, and I've been a practicing Sufi Muslim since then, but I still feel completely Jewish. The two religions are not, contrary to all the craziness out there. There's no significant contradiction between the two. And in fact, the Quran mentions the Torah many times, and a lot of the stories are the same. So I just wanted to kind of say that. So in an understanding of this kind of a monotheist or theistic approach to spirituality, and I talk about it in the book, there's not a belief in a big beard in the sky. We're not talking about like some angry other being that's sitting in judgment and kind of ordering things. It's an understanding that I think that I've found in so many different paths and religions and spiritualities around the globe, which is just this experience of oneness, that there is a oneness that we are all an expression of, and that everything is an expression of. And if that's really true, which my own personal experiences tell me that, I'm not going to try to convince anybody of that, but that's where I'm coming from, then everything is that. Everything is an expression of that, including business. It's not like there's the oneness from, that's from which the galaxies and the universe and the stars and the planets and the whole earth and the oceans and the mountains, all, and all of us are expressions of, except for business. Like, it's not like this special thing that's outside of reality. And so it can be an expression of love. It hasn't been. A lot of people have not spent the time to find the love that's inherent in business as it is inherent in everything. But if we take the time to look, I don't believe in what I think of as like gas tank spiritual approach to business, where you fill up on spirituality, do your prayer or meditation or what have you, fill up with a good feeling, and then come to business until you run down again and then go fill up again. Instead, I want to encourage all of us to, like, is love possible and care in a sales conversation, in your website, in how you craft your offer, in how you choose your pricing, and your systems and your structures of the business. I believe it is, and that's what my work has been about, is bringing that out and discovering and naming and describing ways to approach every aspect of business from a place of love and a place of sustainability and a place of relational connection, connective, love-based work. There's no place in life that love doesn't belong.
Yeah, and I think a lot of folks, maybe, I don't know of what age, can remember a love-based business. Like, maybe there was a local tailor, right? Where my kids remember their pediatric dentist who would speak in a, Donald Duck voice and have cartoons playing, and right.
Right.
So, like, okay, well, the guy's doing good. I mean, he's got a full waiting room. He's got, 4 assistants, and he's clearly successful. But it didn't look like an act. It wasn't like, the camera stops rolling and he's like, God, takes care of the bastards for today.
Right. Right. And what's funny is that, well, what's funny is that so many people, I think that there's a lot of examples of that, of people who are like, when they're dealing with their clients or their patients or the people that they're serving, that kind of care comes out naturally. And I think where people trip up is when they okay, so when the people are doing the billing and they're sending out the invoices, do they have that same sense of connection and care and remembering, like, oh yeah, these are going out to human beings, or we're going to set up this system, or the legal framework for the business? Like, is there a way to then express care for people? Like, does an invoice need to look like some cold piece of hard legalistic thing, or can it express that same kind of care? It can express the care and the love, and you can build into your business structures and supports and business models that help to care for people. If people are struggling financially, is your business set up not to care for everybody? We can't expect an individual business to undo or overturn or make up for the systemic financial injustices in our system. But can it do some of that? Can it do a little bit? Can it care for a certain number of people within the structure of that business? And it can, people can do that. They can bring that same care that you have when you're facing a client to all aspects of the business.
Yeah. So let's go there for a little bit about, just sort of pricing, because I've, I grew up the child of a labor organizer, where, the mantra of my childhood was up with the workers, down with up with the wages, down with the bosses.
Right. And I was a shop steward in a union when I was a paramedic.
Okay.
SEIU Local 250. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So we have, so there's that feeling that both that good up, wages should be up, but there's always this question, like, if I set a price, it feels very win-lose, right? If I raise my price by $1, then someone else is out $1 and that comes to me. And like, how much is it okay, right? That we shouldn't have billionaires, but aren't there some good billionaires? And, how
Right.
much, like, can I
Yeah.
go on a nice vacation somewhere in a town where there's people begging? Like, all of it comes
I know.
to the
I
head
know.
there.
Well, see, this is the challenge because we have these huge systemic injustices. Like in a healthy culture, there would be, I mean, there are different versions. In some healthy cultures, maybe everybody would have exactly the same. In other healthy cultures, there could be disparities where some people had more and some people had less. But in a truly healthy culture, we would not have people homeless and starving, right? While other people had so much. We would be able to have a sense of collective care to make sure that everybody had, enough to be cared for. And then would some people have a little more? Sure. Is that harm if everybody's being cared for? Not necessarily. When we have the kind of situation that we have now, where especially here in the United States, we have so many people houseless, without shelter. We have so many people food insecure. We have so many people impoverished. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but I truly think that billionaires should not exist. I don't know where the line is. I don't know if anyone can just draw the line where this amount of money is okay and this amount of money is unethical. But I do know that billions are unethical. No single person should control, or family should control that much wealth. Is it okay in our culture, for people to have a few millions so that they can have retirement, they have a nice house, they can care for their loved ones? I don't see that as unethical. There's enough wealth here that we could care for everyone and have some, and have that. Um, and I think that, and I don't, I think it's capitalism that creates this win-lose picture. Like if I get $1, then you lose $1. I think that it's much more people's experience that when they do have enough, if they're getting help from someone, they're happy to pay the person. We go through a somatic, heart-centered, resonant price exercise with our clients where they check in to see what the right price is. And many of our clients are undercharging because they care and because there's also, the challenge asking for what they truly need. So many of us are. But the response when they come up to a resonant price, a price that's really going to support them, the one that feels right in their heart, so many they're not then like going sky's the limit and charging some unethically high price. They're usually just coming up to a price that's really supporting them. And so many times they report back, when I went to my clients, I was so scared, tell them about the price rise. But when I did, they said, I wondered when you were going to finally raise your prices. Here, I'm so happy to be supporting you. That is a much more common response, because I think it's a much more common response for us to care for one another. I want to see you do well. You want to see me do well. We want to care for one another. When we're put to extremes, and when someone is starving, and when someone doesn't have a home, people have different kinds of reactions to that kind of trauma. But even when that happens, so often people are still helping one another. There's still a spirit of generosity. The only time where we really consistently see people kind of withdraw that sense of generosity is when they become ultra wealthy. It's not across the board. It's not universal. There are plenty of people that are generous when they're ultra wealthy. But there's also this, they've done studies to show that when somebody becomes ultra wealthy, I'm talking hundreds of millions, billions, like these unethically high amounts of money, that more money that they could spend in generations. They can buy multiple houses and boats and have so much money in the bank and still have more than that and still want more than that. They've shown that people, when they have that kind of wealth, they begin to believe falsehoods. They begin to believe, oh, it's because I'm better than other people. It's because, they don't think of the the fortune they have. They don't think of the exploitation that was necessary for them to gain truly that much money. And it disconnects you. It disconnects you from what I think is a really healthy interdependency on each other. And yeah, and that doesn't kick in when you have enough to retire on and to care for yourself and to have a nice vacation, but it kicks in at higher levels. And I think we have to really guard our hearts, you know?
Mhm. Well, I think a lot of the people who are listening to this are probably like your clients, undercharging.
Right.
So what, that comes with a cost right? It's not like, I was reading another book that talked about like had these quadrants about whether you're, sort of me-centered or we-centered, and whether you're expansive or extractive. And it's like, and they talked about the quadrant that is we, but extractive is called people pleasing, right? Where
right.
you're
You're
not,
trying to get your
actually,
needs met. You've been probably usually people that have had some kind of trauma on them, or they've been, women that have been subjected to so much sexism and patriarchy where they've never had the freedom to be able to clearly state their own needs without getting pushed down, find sideways ways to get their needs met. That's a function of systemic injustice. And when people are caught in that, it's like that sounds like a really brilliant. What's the name of the book? That sounds like a brilliant. If you remember,
it's called becoming coachable.
Oh, interesting. Well, I think it sounds like a brilliant insight into that structure.
Yeah, and their point, they're not trying to dig into the traumatic antecedents, but rather just pointing out that people pleasing is not actually the same as helping your community flourish.
Right.
Right. Because you talk in the book about like if you need to get your needs met, just don't get them met where they can be met. Don't get your needs for affirmation met in 2-hour sales conversations.
Right. Exactly. And I think that, I said this earlier, but I think it bears repeating, is that we cannot individually make up for systemic injustices. We cannot, when there's a need for collective care, I've seen so many people from a place of deep care say, oh, I can't charge that much because then the people that are like me that need the help won't be able to afford it. The challenge with that is that the people that capitalism, that our culture demands the most from and gives the least to, people of color, women, queer folks, are the ones that are then asked to do more for free or for less, and exhausted and become depleted. Just from a business perspective, if you can charge a resonant price and get that from clients that can pay you, and then you can be full, then when you get the guidance in your heart, while this individual, I just had someone pop up who's been a member of our community, really desperate situation. And I said, would it be helpful if we gave you a free membership for a year? And, from a place of fullness, it's easy to offer that. But if I offer that across the board to everyone who approaches, then we don't have the resources to be able to offer it when we're really being asked by the divine, by our hearts, by a sense of collective care to help individuals. And I'd much rather see that used in a more precise manner rather than just categorically undercharging so that nobody really gets the help that they need.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful to me. So another thing that slapped me in a very lovely way was your idea that marketing is about safety.
Yes.
I learned, as I said, just the opposite. Bullets wound. You want to kind of, find their pain point and push it till their eyes water, and then promise them a solution. And what was also interesting is like you had a model of like a sales letter about that was not different from the one that I learned from a totally opposite perspective around here's the problem, here's why you haven't solved it so far, here's my approach and why it might be different. Like I'm doing all that, but it comes from a completely different place.
It's such, intention does, there's a saying in social justice work that intention is not greater than impact, meaning that if you have an intention to do good, but you still have terrible practices, you can really still cause harm. And that's true. However, if we let intention inform our actions, it changes those actions in sometimes really profound ways. So like in the example that you're talking about, a lot of people have this reaction to talking about pain points because they've been used so manipulatively, exactly the way you've described. This is how I talk about it because that's what's being taught, like activate somebody's trauma response to the point where they're so agitated, and then buying from you soothes the trauma response in some way. And that's a obviously terrible, toxic way to get sales. However, people are still struggling. If you can see your clients as whole, if you can see your clients as divine and beautiful, and you can still see them in their struggling, there's a quote in Sufism that is attributed to God that says, "I was a hidden treasure, and I yearned to be known, and so I created the creation in order to be known." That desire to be witnessed, to be known, to be seen, is the creative impulse that created the creation from a Sufi point of view. And we all have that deep need to be seen. So if you skate over the challenges that people have, then they don't feel seen. But if you can also see them as whole, there's a difference between, like, if someone's a chiropractor and they say, you've had a terrible back injury and you may never pick up your child again if you don't get your back fixed. Get in here quick. That kind of energy is exactly what you were talking about. It's so toxic, but you can easily say, you have had an active, wonderful life. You've had, like so many people, an injury that's made it impossible for you to do certain things. We know that people can heal from these kinds of things. And I just want you to have hope that your body has the ability to heal. I have one way of doing that, and if you resonate with how I work, let's see if I can help you. It's very different. It doesn't box people in. People feel seen. They feel a sense of hope. They feel like, oh yeah, my body can heal from that. I can pick my child up again. But they're not like, oh, this is the only solution. If you don't come to me, you're doomed. It's like, oh, it leaves this sense of, it brings a sense of safety because they feel seen and respected and cared for. And when people get that, oh, my marketing isn't trying to grab people and pull them in. Attraction is the province of love. We can't manufacture love. We can receive it, we can fill with it, we can express it, but we can't manufacture it. When we bring that caring that our heart naturally has for the people that we want to serve, and then we think about the ways that they might feel unsafe or nervous or anxious coming in to see us to get the help, and we know, and we put that, and we bring that attention to our marketing, going, how can I help someone feel cared for and safe enough to at least be able to then discern whether they want my help? That is such a different way to approach marketing. It's very effective. It creates trust, but it's non-toxic. It's non-traumatic.
Yeah. Well, what suddenly came to me is, like 10 years ago, there was a lot of talk around pickup artists. Like there are all these guys, right, who are like, the game and it was, it was very cool in a way, like the mind could work this way and people could have this kind of power. And for a lot of young men, it was like finally I can, I can get what I want from women, and there were all these techniques around like negging, like ignoring the woman you want and insulting her, and finally what came to me was, okay, so that's a great way to attract like really traumatized women.
Right, right. It
Like
is.
your marketing, you're like marketing, like if you're doing trauma-based marketing, you're going to attract traumatized clients who are still acting out of their trauma. And I don't see how you're going to be able to even if you wanted to turn that
Well,
around.
it does. I mean, it works because so many people in the culture are traumatized. Nearly everyone has had trauma because of this is a traumatic and traumatizing culture. But you're right, it does. If you notice, so many of those businesses have very strict no refund policies because if they did, so many people would experience buyer's remorse. And all that pickup artist stuff arises out of the fact that so many men are traumatized they don't know how to express, they don't have access. They've had their, I know for myself, it took me years to regain access to my emotional self, to be able to be vulnerable and soft and know how to connect with people, with women or whoever in an authentic, in a caring way. And, and so all of these men, all of these young men are walking around traumatized. They're walking around steeped in toxic masculinity, and of course they're not getting their needs met and they're hurting, and then somebody promises them, oh, you can get your needs met this way, and it's so terrible for the women, it's so terrible for the men, and the people teaching it make money, but the truth is that their hearts are being broken also over and over again doing that, living that way.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, so you talked about the needs of these people not being met, which was another one of the jujitsu moves you pulled on me in the book, where you talked about neediness. Like I've never heard the word needy or neediness used in any way that wasn't negative. And you say neediness is divine and it's a good thing, and we should not be ashamed of our neediness.
No, I mean, we're all needy constantly. You know, I mean, if I don't breathe 12 times a minute, I'll die, and I can't manufacture the air. If I don't eat or I don't drink, like we all are needy. We're also, it's been shown over and over again, that infants that don't get love and connection don't grow, and some of them die. It's like neglect is, our emotional needs and our physical needs are very real. The problem is that in this culture we direct our needs in unhealthy ways, in ways that don't actually get those needs met. And so if we are able to, in a healthy way, embrace our neediness, that enables us to find how to get those needs met to the extent that we can. And it also frees us from bringing unconscious neediness into environments and situations where they're not going to get met and they're going to, you know, undermine our business. A sales conversation is not a great place to bring unconscious neediness around social connection. So many of us have deficits around neediness, around community, around real friendships, around love and care. We need to get those met. But if we try to get them met inside a sales conversation, it can really undermine the process and we won't know what's going on. And there's other places, like if we have a need, to be cared for, and to have food on the table and to, or even just to be appreciated, but we bring that into our pricing or into our sales copy and we try to get our needs met there, then things start to get a little twisted if we can face them head on. I talk about how one of the most important capacities that a human being can develop is the capacity to be with uncomfortable emotions. I don't mean staying in toxic situations or being abused or being in a situation where you're being harmed. But there's a lot of situations where the emotions that come up are simply uncomfortable. And if we can have the ability, the capacity to be with those without needing to soothe them or fix them or make them go away, one, we find out they're not fatal. And two, it gives us a lot more spaciousness, wisdom, resourcefulness to be able to access true sources of nourishment for those needs rather than, like I said, bringing it out in unconscious or sideways ways inside our business that undermine our ability to care for people and to care for ourselves.
Yeah, and so much of the uncomfortableness that we generate is a mismatch between what's actually going on and what we think, what it's reminding us of, or what it's triggering, or what it's bringing back to
Right.
life, right? So, like, one of the things I love about business is it's so unforgiving in terms of consequences, right? Like, I could pretend I'm like a good person, a loving father, a good neighbor, a upstanding community member, because there's no scorecard necessarily, but like there's a level of like, rub your nose in reality. Like, business doesn't let you lie to yourself around a bunch of things, and I think there's something bracing about saying that I'm going to take my confused life, my confused mind, my confused world, and put it in a place where where I can see how I'm impacting reality, and that I can't make up things. That there's a way in which business can become a conduit for other hunger for reality, as opposed to the trauma-based interpretations that I'm putting on everything.
Yeah, I hear you. I agree. The only thing that I would disagree with is that business is special in that way. I think that I think that there's times where, my son the other day, they're teens now. We have teen sons. Was I was trying to be loving and caring, but the way I was doing it, my son said, Dad, I wasn't looking for a solution. I'm like, oh my goodness. He just wanted to be listened to. He didn't want me to fix something. God, how often fall into that? And so there was a scorecard. If I ignore that feedback, I'm eventually going to create, maybe sooner than later, distance between me and him in one of my most important relationships in my life. And so I think that life is constantly giving us that feedback from all areas of our life. And it's true that because of the culture in business, we pay really close attention when a sale doesn't go through, or the money doesn't show up, or, something like that. But I think that um, uh, those same kinds of scorecards, if you will, are happening all the time in our relationships. But if, as men especially, we're not taught to value, or we're not taught how to look for those kinds of signs, then we miss them. And so but I absolutely agree that with you that does happen in business, and it does require us to face the reality. It's like I am a spiritual teacher. I've been trained as a spiritual teacher, a master teacher in my lineage. I teach a lot on spirituality, but the truth is I'm a really practical person. I cling to spiritual practice with my fingertips. I was a paramedic. I was a shop steward. I do woodworking. We like working with our hands in the ground. I love working in business and the practical aspects. Um, Healing, like privileging the inner over the outer, I think is one of the big mistakes that a lot of spiritual people that are spiritually focused, make. The outer, the physical, is just as sacred, it's just as holy. And uh, we need to find the love in the sacred structures. There's as much love in my heart and in that peach tree that I can see outside my window. There's as much love in being able to deeply do spiritual healing with a client as there is in the actual physical client agreement that we send. If I'm willing to put it there, if I'm willing to let that flourish and be expressed there. And so I don't think we need to be limited in where we find reality or where we find the love.
So, yeah, I think there are ways in which for many of us it's just a clearer thing, like in sports also, like there's a number. Like it's easy, we all of us can be a little bit ADHD or autistic
Mm-hmm.
on various parts of the spectrum. Like numbers kind of make it easier. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about, and this is my tortured segue to a bullet point that I wanted to get to, is so the other thing that that had me on my back in your book is money is not energy. And it's my podcast, so I can say fuck. I am so fucking tired of all the people who've tried, whom I've gone to for like getting healing around money, and they're saying it's just energy. And I was like weirded out that I didn't like that, or it seemed like it was
Yeah.
allowing all sorts of horrible things to be okay. But like until you said it, I'm like, oh my God, thank God. I don't even know what you mean yet, but thank God.
It's so true. I think again that's kind of a bypass approach, is to say, well, it's just energy. Everything is just energy. I mean, there's a truth in it, in that everything is an expression of the divine. If you go below the physical, everything is just an expression of love, or an expression of divine presence, or expression of energy, or however you want to talk about it. But money only exists as money in the physical plane. And we need to relate to it in the physical way. Like I'm going to bring it back to nature and gardening. The peach tree is just energy. But if all I deal with it is energetically, and I don't, but we have a drought and I'm not watering it, it's not going to live. If I don't give it healthy soil, it's not going to live, or it's not going to do well, or be able to produce fruit. If I don't care for its physical needs and the physical environment that it needs, if it doesn't have sunlight, if it's planted in shade, there's all of these things that we need to pay attention to physically in order for it to thrive. If we're going to deal with money, yes, of course, there's a spiritual and energetic aspect that is worth paying attention to. I'm not saying ignore that, but we have to also pay attention to the physical aspects of it in the world. The fact that, like, well, it's money and it buys things, and there's ways to be with it that are healthy, and there are ways to be with it that are unhealthy. And if we don't pay attention to that, I think we're doing ourselves a real disservice.
So what do you see as the problems with the pure money equals energy message? Because I know it messed me up, but I can't explain how.
Well, I think
you've been around the block a few more times around these topics.
Well, I think what it does is it then tells people that it all comes back to capitalism and colonialism, and this Western culture. It's a particularly individualistic way of looking at things. It's like, well, it's just energy. So if your personal energy isn't right, then then you are going to mess it up, and it doesn't give enough weight to the fact, like, what, you can learn how to be with money. You can get help on how to be with money. I guarantee you, people that are very wealthy are not just being energetic about it. They have financial advisors, they have accountants, they have bookkeepers. They're dealing with the numbers of it. They're not just sitting dealing with the energy. So many people come to us saying, what, I think I have a problem receiving. And but no matter how much I work on my receiving, I'm not getting more money in my business. I say, well, let's look at the business. And I'm like, they don't understand how to hold a sales conversation. They don't have a clear offer. Their messaging isn't clear. They're not like they don't have a good way of connecting with people that creates trust, the safety piece we were talking about earlier. When they do that, they learn these different pieces and they put the outer pieces in place and they learn how to hold it in their heart. Suddenly they're making more money. And it's like, yeah, of course they probably have some issues with receiving. We all do, and it's worth healing, but it's not as big a mountain as they thought it was.
Yeah, and the implication is if I have trouble receiving, then I have to go. I can't receive. I can't make money until I've healed like every last mommy trauma that I've ever experienced, and then there's no way to move forward. And I think it really reifies this kind of brokenness.
It
Because look at
does.
all
It
the
does.
look at this person who wrote the book telling me that money is energy is raking it in apparently.
Right. Well, of course they are. Because they put their marketing in place and their sales in place and all of that other stuff. I mean, I don't. I mean, let's do a survey of all these people who have tens and hundreds of millions of dollars and find out how many of them are completely enlightened or energetically completely aligned. I mean, really? I mean, the proof. It's surprising. It's not surprising to me on one hand, but it's surprising to me on another that has gained so much traction when it's so clearly not true. Based on
Mm,
evidence on how many people are wealthy that have done horrible things and are completely unaligned with the good and completely it's like, what kind of energy is money if that's true? So yeah,
mm.
if that can bring you some relief,
That's
um,
great.
I'm glad.
Yeah. So when I was preparing for this conversation, the one thing I did not want to do was have you go through every single one of the steps of business and just to kind of separate it from ethics and morality and spirituality and love and just go through the steps. But I don't want people to leave this conversation thinking that your book is a book of philosophy.
No,
That
no, there's some really practical stuff in there. I'm glad you
So
mentioned.
could
Thank
you,
you for mentioning
yeah,
it.
could you talk just market your book for a minute, just because I want people to understand what it is.
Yes. So we do start out with the beginning of the book talking about healing around business and around money and around the fact that you can trust yourself and what does that really mean, in a more profound way, because I found that it's really hard to get your arms around the practical pieces without doing at least some of the healing, not complete healing, but enough so that your heart feels open again to like, oh, maybe there is a way through. But then we talk really practical ways about the stages of business and what's involved in learning that. There's two full chapters on marketing and how to get your arms around that. There's pieces around productivity, around how to be in good, healthy relationship with different types of projects in your business. It's like I said, we've been helping people grow their businesses, and that takes work and that takes putting things in place. And, is the book everything you need to grow a business? No, that would, you would need many more books to cover all the little details of things. But the intention of the book is to help you have a healthier relationship to business, understand how it develops, understand the pieces that need to be put into place, get your hands dirty in some of these places. And I mean dirty in terms of like gardening, not in terms of immoral. I like getting my hands dirty because I dig in the dirt, planting things. Um, and then be able to tell like, oh, I now understand why my business isn't working or what it needs in order to develop. And I know, and now my heart is open enough that I know that, oh, I need to be able to learn this piece. It helps you know where to focus and how to really develop your business over time.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's lots of great people who can teach those things, you included. But one of the
Mhm.
gifts you give the reader is a kind of a discernment about how to protect yourself against predatory business teacher marketers. Right. Just there's a
Yes.
beautiful moment where you're like, oh, you stopped in a sales conversation where felt like you're being pressured for a fake false sense of urgency. And you said, boy, this doesn't feel ethical. In fact, I teach sales, and I teach that this is an unethical way to proceed. Right? Simply, like again, as you said, slowing it down, and here listening to your heart.
Yeah, exactly.
So, last question: you wrote a book, much harder than a blog post, much harder than 100 blog posts. I'm curious what you knew at the end of writing the book that maybe you didn't know you knew, or that kind of arose from taking on a project that big.
It's a really good question. Um, I don't know if there was anything. I mean, I've been doing this for 23 years. I don't think there's anything that was like completely new. Um, but I think one of the things that was really reinforced and deepened in me is how much anything worthwhile being done can't be done solo. Like I had so much help getting this book written and getting it out into the world. And over again, I needed help applying my own, I won't say my own, the principles that I've discovered and learned or, articulated. Um, I needed help too. I needed help too. And, I think that can be a challenge that's, like, so many people are like, I'm a healer and I'm sick. It's like, well, you need help too. I help people develop businesses and I need someone to help me too. Like we need help. We're not meant to do this alone. And a healthy culture, healthy life, a life full of joy and love is a life that's lived at least in part. I know we all have different amounts of, introvert, extrovert, how much contact, but we can't ever do it truly completely alone. We need to be the earth for one another, and to lift each other up and to care for one another. And to do that, yes, of course, we give care, but we also have to be willing to receive care and to be humble enough to do that. And it's been one of the most tender, vulnerable things I've done in a long time is asking people to help me get the book out into the world. And it's been really a beautiful, affirming, supportive experience being vulnerable in that way.
Love it. So yeah, we have to take our own medicine, right?
It's true.
Beautiful, beautiful. Anything you want to say about the book or anything, or about your business? We should talk about your business briefly so people know where to find you.
Yeah. Heart of Business lives at heartofbusiness.com. On the homepage, if you scroll down, you can download an excerpt from the book. Yeah, the book. Yay. It's a book, like a lot of times, like getting learning or training or coaching is an investment, right? It costs money to provide it. It costs money to get it. It's worth it. But, take your time figuring out who resonates. If you've taken anything away that's positive from what I've been saying, but maybe I don't personally, or our approach doesn't personally resonate, find somebody who does and learn from them. But a great way to dive more deeply into what we're doing is to start by getting the book, to get on our email list, to like let us send you help and see if it resonates. And then if it does, you'll know if you want to get more help from us.
Great. Is there an audio version?
Not yet.
Yeah.
It's not currently planned for, meaning that we just launched this and I would like to do that, but there's nothing been scheduled yet. We'll see how it all unfolds.
Would you be the reader?
I hope so. I hope so. I'd like to be.
Excellent. All right. Mark Silver of Heart of Business, author of Heart-Centered Business. Thank you so much for writing this book. I got healing from it. I hope, and thank you for, sharing your spirit with us here. I'm sure that a lot of readers, watchers, listeners will find balm in it as well for their own journeys of contribution and love.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here, Howie, and for the work that you do in the world.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. I'll talk to you again soon.
Yes, I hope so. Peace.
And that's a wrap. You can get the show notes with links to Mark's business and the book at plantyourself.com/569. So I'm recording this early in the morning NYC time, U.S. Eastern Coast. Just landed last night, spent the night here, and got all sorts of fun adventures and excitement to do over the next couple of weeks. So the Frisbee tournament is in 2 weeks, so I have to sort of keep, in terms of movement news, got to keep moving, keep building cardiovascular strength, at least for this week before I taper, while not re-injuring. So I'm thinking of, jogs in Central Park and fun stuff like that. And it'll be good to see some folks. I know I have a bunch of people from Florida that we're going to connect with during the half times and between games. And it's fun kind of to be back here to have fall and to see all the little subtle differences between the U.S. and Spain that I hadn't really noticed because I've just become used to them. So it's a little bit of a cultural re-entry and reacclimation, and I'll keep letting you know how it's going. So as always, be well, my friends.